Kate Dourian, MEES contributing editor and non-resident fellow at the Arab Gulf States Institute of Washington. I'm going to kick off with you, Kate, because I think you've been to about 100 plus OPEC meetings, and that's not a reflection on your age, but more a reflection on how many meetings they've had during your tenure. They've met a lot more often than they used to in the old days, but ultimately, I can't remember in my years, which is not a short period, 25 years or so covering this OPEC group, that we've gone into such a major meeting with so little sort of pre-meeting noise, pre-meeting leaks, and so forth. Something to stop creeping out overnight. But your thoughts, the last trading day ahead of this OPEC Plus meeting, is there a surprise in the kitchen?
I don't think so. And, Reuters seems to have had some leak. I actually started my energy career at Reuters. So they claim to have had, 3 sources telling them that they are cooking something, but it won't really happen until 2025 because they have to look at these baselines. I don't think anything will happen. If anything's going to happen, it won't be until the fourth quarter. I think they'll wait for the US election. They'll wait to see proof of this reports from the IMF that Chinese demand is actually, has been revised up to 5%. I think they'll wait to see what happens with interest rates. I think there's a lot of uncertainties at the moment. And, even with that leaked report, which is everywhere, the Reuters report saying they're working on some formula where they will keep the cuts, the voluntary cuts until 2025. And of course, there is a can of worms, which is the new baselines that they have to negotiate. And don't forget, they're doing it online this time. So there is no chance to actually grab one of the delegates and find out what's going on. So it's going to be a difficult one. And yeah, as everybody said, and I think you've talked about this in your other podcast, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman likes to spring surprises. And so nobody really knows. If anything, it'll be some kind of formula that we're all going to be scratching our heads and saying, are they cutting? How much are they cutting? It's like the 2.2 million was not really 2.2 million because it included voluntary cuts the Saudis had committed to already. So it was much less. And don't forget, some of these members can't really produce what they can. I think one of the biggest problems is going to be how to deal with the UAE. The UAE's quota is far too low compared to what they say is their production capacity, which is 4.85 now, very quietly on their website. So I think that's one of the issues that they might stumble on.
We lost Angola the last time this conversation came to the fore last November. And there was a bit of pressure to bring those two things into alignment, actual capabilities and quotas. Your thoughts on the fragility of OPEC to force to sort of have this difficult conversation? Are there others that could fall off the tree as this sort of becomes a little bit more robust in bringing into alignment quotas and actual production? Are OPEC going into a vulnerable period with this discussion?
Yeah, I recently looked at these scenarios. Would OPEC Plus survive, particularly the energy transition? This sort of phasing out of fossil fuels. But I don't think it'll make a difference. I mean, you might lose a few of the smaller African producers. It won't really make much difference. I think so long as Saudi Arabia and Russia are on board and they seem to be committed to OPEC Plus. I mean, don't forget, Putin for him, OPEC Plus is a platform, right? He's isolated, but OPEC Plus is a platform for him where he can actually exert some influence on what happens to the global economy. He's still managing to export his oil. The other day I was looking at the dark fleet. I mean, it's huge, 10 to 12% of the total tanker fleet, so there are ways around it. Now, of course, if there is an election in November and you have Trump coming back in, despite his guilty verdict, which I don't think is going to land him in prison, this man, it would kill anybody else, it would be the death for anybody else, but not for him. We have a hurricane season coming up, which is apparently going to be quite strong. You have the election coming up, which might mean tighter sections on or more I mean, the sanctions there against Iran, there'll be more sanctions, there'll be more an effort to apply the sanctions more strictly. You might get, more about. So I think it's very, very difficult to see how things are going. But on OPEC Plus, I think they're there to stay. They've survived wars between their members. But what I notice, and I look at all the media, the regional media, when was the last time you saw a conversation between Mohammed bin Zayed, the president of the UAE, and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia? You don't. So that tells me, I mean, there's conversations going with Qatar, between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, between Oman and the UAE getting closer to each other, with Kuwait, but you don't see that much of a rapport between those two, the two biggest economies. And that really matters because the UAE has, let's not forget, they've had an issue over baselines in the past, which delayed an agreement and, prices actually responded. So I think if the UAE says our capacity is 4.85, so we should not be producing less than Iraq. I think that's going to be an issue. Their quota is far too low compared to what they say is their production capacity. And the IEA, don't forget, has them at much higher levels. They've got them above 3.3, I think. So that is going to cause a bit of a problem.
Your call of what will OPEC do this weekend?
Well, listen, I mean, usually doesn't the market move on the rumor? I mean, we've had this Reuters story about this thing they're cooking, and the market is we're under 82. So I think I don't think prices are going to move that much unless they come up with a big surprise. But no, I think it's more of the same. If their own
more of the same for 3 months or more of the same for 6?
I think more of the same probably for the rest of the year. But don't forget, OPEC's own demand forecast is much higher than anybody else's. It's like 2.25 or something million. So, where is are they working on the basis of their own analysis? Because it's OPEC Plus now, right? They've changed the formula. So, if we're talking 2.25, then, it should be time to increase production because we are getting into this season, the driving season, and more people are driving because they're afraid to fly now. There you go.